Thank you, everybody, for picking this breakout and joining me to talk a little bit about mobile. When we have asked people for feedback as to previous K8s, one of the things that we keep getting consistent feedback about is, hey, can you build in more sessions where you can start to talk about best practices? What is working? And what are the things that we should be thinking about across some of the biggest topics that we're trying to grow in our programs today? And so that's what this session is about. There'll be a bank of breakouts just after lunch that you've already selected from and you should have tickets for. And we're going to spend the next 45, a little bit less, minutes talking about mobile. I'm going to talk, and then I'm going to have one of our clients come up on stage and tell you how some of the things that I talk about are going to come alive. My name is Will Martin-Gill. I was head of product here for 4 years before Shahar took that honor, and I now lead strategy and partnerships here at Kensho. The first thing you should probably know about me is I look nothing like that on a surfboard, but hopefully you guys can, especially on mobile, once we're done talking about some of the things that we're going to be talking about. I think mobile is one of those challenging areas where everybody's been talking about 2012 was a year of mobile, 2013 was a year of mobile, 2014 was the year of mobile. And yet every year, I get the privilege of talking to a lot of you guys throughout the year, and I don't think there's been a single year where at the end of it people said, you know what, we really figured mobile out this year. To the point where I think a lot of people ended up giving up at some point and saying, you know what, mobile is so big in most of the channels that we work with that maybe we don't need a mobile-specific strategy. Maybe if you just work really hard on the channels that we're in, mobile will take care of itself. And in the last 18, 24 months, I've started to see it come back and say, you know what, that strategy is okay, and yes, mobile is growing for us. Obviously, a lot of search is mobile now, a lot of social especially is mobile. But we need to be thinking a little bit more deeply about how to engage advertisers on mobile devices. We need to think more specifically about mobile app install strategies, about how to drive mobile web purchases. How do we do that? And we'll start by talking a little bit about where mobile is. First of all, nobody needs another up and to the right chart that shows how mobile is growing. You guys know that. But I thought it would be useful to show the last chart that Mary Meeker in her Internet Trends report put out there in Q1 of last year. I think that report will be updated for 2017 and should be dropping pretty soon. But what you see in the green bar is that of all of the time growth that people are spending with digital media, all of the growth has been driven by mobile in the last 8 years, which is what's then leading to a lot of the investment and a lot of the relevance that we're talking about. The one thing that we see is that most advertisers that are spending a lot of money, and there are folks that are spending tens of millions, even hundreds of millions of dollars on mobile advertising alone, the one thing they have in common by now is that they've moved beyond single strategies in mobile, and they are optimizing across mobile app install. They're optimizing to mobile app engagement as well and making sure that the apps that people have downloaded are actually getting used. And they're optimizing to mobile web if that's relevant to them. And I think mobile web is relevant to almost everybody who has dual experiences in app and in web, unless you're a gaming company that only has apps, it is relevant. So what I'm going to talk about here, the best practices are going to span all three of these things, and you'll see tips on how to think about making them better. And when we ask advertisers, so what is it that you really figured out that really enabled you to scale mobile? There's a lot of tips that we receive, and the list is long, but they can be grouped into three big buckets. The first is to really be there where people are engaging with mobile. We'll talk a little bit about that. The second is mobile tracking continues to be a big challenge for many of you. I think even more broader than mobile tracking, it's understanding the impact of mobile. And so we'll talk about some of the latest things that people are doing to bridge that gap. And then if you're in the right places, if you are understanding the impact in the right way, it really is about improving the effectiveness of your mobile ad spend. And so we'll talk about some of the ways that that's being done today. So let's begin at the beginning. One of the things that is a trend we continue to see is that apps are the story on mobile in a very big way. This chart that Mediametrics put out there, and it estimates the percentage of time that people are spending on different digital media. They, between the 2 years of July 14 to July 16, saw that mobile apps went up from 40 to 50% of all the time spent. Massive increase in that. In fact, there are multiple studies that have been put out that of all the time that people are spending in their mobile phones, apps account for about 80 to 90% of that time. And by the way, the blue bars on this pie chart represent tablet, where there's a pretty similar effect that's out there. So when you think about advertising, and when you think about where you want your ads to appear, many folks are spending a lot of money on mobile ad networks. They're spending a lot of money on exchanges. A lot of those are very heavy in the mobile web side of things. It is very important to be focused on what publishers can get you in front of folks using these apps. And the other realization is that not all apps are created equal. Not all publishers have the same reach. Both Nielsen and Comscore have put out statistics in the last 3 months that basically show that 8 out of the top 10 apps are either owned by Google or Facebook. And that's a crazy stat, but it also sends you in the right direction of saying, okay, these two publishers need to be maximized in order for you to maximize the mobile opportunity. Now, what's also interesting is that a lot of the advertisers that we've been talking about this morning also appear on these lists. Not appearing, but in the 11 to 20 slots are Snap and Pinterest. And somebody like Amazon, who's also starting to push into advertising, has popped up as number 10 as well. So these big publishers with native ad placements, captive audiences, tend to be some of the places where people are spending the most amount of time online. And the reason why, from an advertising perspective, to spend time maximizing these guys is not just because they have great reach. It's because of all the reasons that Tom and Shahar were talking about this morning. First, each of these publishers is coming up with some pretty innovative ad types. And they are full screen, they are engaging, they allow you to do things like swipe that have led to click-through rates that are anywhere between 5 and 20 times better than banner ads, especially in the mobile medium and device. There's results-based optimization rather than CPM optimization, better measurement for all the reasons that we said earlier, and an ability to connect the dots between desktop and mobile, and then audience targeting, where today, especially on the exchanges in mobile, it is hard to get good data to be able to target. But if you work with these publishers, and that's what we're focused on helping enable, you can get some pretty good results there. Now, I know some of you in the audience are saying, okay, that's all great, but we knew this already. We're already working with Google. We're already working with Facebook on mobile. What's interesting is that I think there's still universally opportunity to make sure that you are taking advantage of all of these publishers at the same time. There's a company called Sensor Tower out there that did a research survey about how many advertisers were optimized across all of the publishers out there. And they had, they looked at the top 25 advertisers for each of Google, Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest. And the realization is that no one single advertiser was in the top 25 for all 4 platforms, not a single one. And then the second is that only 20% of advertisers were actually optimized and in the top 25 for more than one. So I think there's a lot of opportunity here to say, which one are you really good at? How can you take the lessons of that one and really start to expand into some of these others? And hopefully, a lot of the capabilities that we've been talking about this morning, especially on Pinterest, but also extending Facebook into Instagram, for example, and doing some of the targeting that we've enabled between search and social can help you expand. It is well worth the time, and as we'll talk about in a bit, it has been part of the way that the best advertisers have learned how to scale. Okay, so you're in the right places, you've maximized the right publishers. let's talk about this measurement problem. And the measurement problem is significant. To highlight the challenge that many of you face every day, there are some paths that are very easy to track. If you're going from desktop to desktop click to desktop conversion, no problem. Pixel tracking can do that pretty easily. If you're going from mobile web to mobile web conversion, no problem, easy. If you're staying within the browser of certain apps like Facebook's, you can also use more traditional forms of tracking and get a pretty good measurement there. However, the minute that you start to talk about cross-device, clearly that's a challenge. Shahar talked this morning about the fact that we have built 9 months ago the ability to bring in third-party data from a number of different third parties that we work with. We have by now Drawbridge, Tapad, Crosswise. You can bring their data in to supplement and start to pull together some of those multi-device paths into one place. There's also another path, which is if you go from mobile web or from another app to your own app, and the conversion is happening in your own app, that is hard to track. No traditional way it is doing that. So we work with a set of 6 mobile measurement partners. These are the likes of Kochava that we work with. And we can also pull that data in and make sure to complete that path. It is one of those where I would think that everybody would be taking advantage of that integration and that connection, but we see many, many advertisers that have not filled in that gap. And if you're interested in finding out more, let's have a conversation afterwards about how it works and see if you're already working with one of these or if we can broker an introduction to help you out. Even with that set of partners, though, there's still paths, and there's going to continue to be more and more paths that aren't contemplated and that are hard to do. So if you're going from one of the apps of one of these publishers and the conversion is on the mobile web or it's on the desktop, those are paths that are going to be hard to capture even for the partners that we've been talking about. So one of the things that we've been working on, Shahar just talked about in the product session this morning, is working with publishers to actually use their data at a more granular level than what we've collaborated on in the past to fill in a lot of these gaps. The early results for advertisers that we've been doing this with, we just did it for 2 retailers in Q4, are pretty astounding. We've actually found that in both cases, the results were pretty similar. If we could ascribe about 1,000 conversions to this particular publisher, i.e. there was an ad that preceded the conversion from that particular publisher, we found that there were an additional 50% of conversions, so another 500 conversions that had not been attributed to this publisher. So all of a sudden, ROI was seen to go up by 50% in terms of the understanding. That's the kind of power that this direction is going to allow us to do. And so we should start having conversations as we roll some of this functionality out about whether this type of data is something that you can use, you can be interested in, and you'll be hearing more about that as we talk about this year. The other big thing as we think about measurement is not just solving the tracking problem. That's probably the one that gets the most airtime. But it's also the issue of, okay, so what is a mobile conversion worth, and especially a mobile paid app install worth? And especially for companies that have really ramped up their spend in mobile, they've realized that paid advertising has a knock-on effect to organic acquisition. If you get somebody through a paid mobile ad, there is an incremental benefit that you get from an additional set of folks that are probably downloading your app that otherwise would not have engaged with you. And the reason for that is twofold. The first is that one of the primary ways of app discovery is word of mouth. Google put out a survey last year that asked, how do you typically discover apps? And the number one answer to that question was, I talk to my friends and my family, and they introduced me to new apps. So the idea that as you get people to download, they get the people around them to also download is important. And that effect is measurable. And so a lot of the folks that we work with have set up tests to be able to look for that correlation between paid and organic conversions to do it. there's an additional science in folks that really focus on mobile app installs as well. And they've seen that actually where you are positioned in the App Store will also have an effect on how big each paid acquisition turns into additional organic acquisitions. And some, like this advertiser, have gone as far as to start to create a table to say, okay, if our app is in the top 10, we know that for every paid install, we're getting another 2 organic installs. And they actually build that into the value that they have for mobile advertising. I don't think there's any kind of universal chart that you can just use for your vertical. These are the types of things that you have to test out and see what it means for your vertical and what it means for your strategy. But we'll talk a little bit about how paid advertising can affect the ranking in the App Store in a little bit. And this certainly is a way to think about the total value of that paid mobile advertising that you're doing. So you've got taking advantage of all the right publishers. You've thinking about the value of mobile in the right way. How do you make sure that you're maximizing the conversion rate and really making this advertising as effective as possible? Well, the first thing to realize is that mobile advertising, smartphone advertising, is still significantly below desktop advertising. This is not a new stat. You guys have seen this. But I thought it was important because, when we then sit and look at what the effectiveness of these mobile ads this is one of the reasons why it can be sometimes hard to build a case for a really scaled up mobile program. So how do you get that conversion rate up? Well, the first way is to actually realize that one of the biggest contributors to whether an ad you send to your mobile experience converts or not is that mobile experience. And I highly encourage anybody who's not already having deep conversations with their product team to test out some of these effects. I highly encourage you to spend some time doing that. Google did a study with, so asked a case study that basically showed that every 1 second that a mobile app and a mobile page is loading faster leads to a 27% increase in conversion rate. This is measurable. And so there's a lot of data out there that can help you have the right conversations with your product teams. And this is one place where marketing should definitely be talking to product. The second big realization is you guys deal with seasonality, and you've been dealing with seasonality for many years. In mobile, seasonality is even more important than anywhere else, at an hourly level, at a daily level, at a weekly level. And it is really important to pay attention to when your own app and your own mobile experience has peaks and valleys. First of all, because we've seen those mobile conversion rates be low, so if you're catching people at times that are not relevant for your service or the thing that you're trying to get across, they're not going to convert. So you need to get there for the right times. But second, because there are ways of affecting app store ranking that deal with momentum. So, all the way back when we looked at organic search and the whole science of SEO, we all know that inbound links, the number of inbound links that you have to any page that you have, is one of the main factors in PageRank, right? Well, it turns out that how you get ranked in the App Store also has an algorithm. And that algorithm has a bunch of variables. And one of the most important variables is how many downloads your app already gets. Okay, so maybe you can affect that, or maybe you can't. If you're early on, you can't really affect that as much. You just don't have as many downloads as other folks. But another important variable in how you're ranked is the momentum. It's not just the absolute number of installs, it's the acceleration or deceleration of installs that you have in a certain time period. So one thing that the best mobile advertisers are doing is to pay very, very close attention to these curves of when they see the natural peaks and valleys in their business, and they use paid advertising to augment those peaks. because that can create extra momentum that then starts giving you the kind of visibility that you might not have if you just had a constant trickle of paid advertising through the whole thing. So it's something to think about. You can certainly use capabilities within Kensho to help you execute against this. Once you understand those times that are particularly important, those days that are particularly important, you can take advantage of our bidding and now real-time bidding optimization. I think Google and Bing have some excellent ways of also allowing you to control mobile ad spend and double down on it through the multipliers that you can control through automated bidding and automated actions. You can turn on and off campaigns on an ongoing basis that can correlate to these peaks and valleys that you see. And you can do that in both search and social. So if you're managing both through our platform, you can start to actually combine and have one combined strategy to take advantage of those peaks and valleys in mobile. The other point to make here is that targeting is extremely important in mobile. The problem can be that a lot of the audience data that you buy, especially when you do mobile ad exchanges, a lot of the data that you buy is from companies that have great ad data sets in desktop, but they don't have as good of a data set in mobile. And this is where taking advantage of the audience capabilities that these publishers we've been talking about put out there is extremely compelling and extremely important to take advantage of. And so you guys hopefully by now have heard about our intent-driven audiences product. It lets you take what people have searched for and create audiences out of them in Facebook. And what a lot of people don't necessarily talk about is that those audiences can be cross-device in nature. So for example, you can have somebody that is researching for cars in the morning create a targetable audience out of that person and then go target them later in the day and find more people like her. You can do that on the search side as well and make sure that the next time that they're searching for those keywords, you're at the top of the search results. That's some of the retargeting lists for search ads that Google and now increasingly Bing and other search advertisers are making, publishers are making available. And you can do it through social as well. You can do it in Facebook to target that audience. So if you haven't experimented with that and you're really trying to figure out how to expand your mobile advertising, I would highly recommend that you check this out and that you try it in the context of growing your mobile advertising. So to put a little bit more color around what we're talking about here, I'm going to bring up Alfred Van Hoven, and he's VP of Interactive from one of our great clients, Camelot. And he's going to talk about how he took a client from being primarily desktop focused to being very much mobile focused using some of the things that we talked about here.
How you doing? Don't have any slides, but I have this little clicker thing. I'm going to start out by asking us a question real quick in regards to mobile so I can help understand the audience. How many of you guys are spending, let's say, about 30% of your budget, your digital acquisition budget in mobile? I've seen no hands. I literally see no hands. One. All right. Okay. So I was going to go to 50%, but all right. So 50%, right? Anybody doing more than that? Okay. So it seems like most of you guys, you're digital marketers, you're spending probably more of your focus on desktop, and the client that I'm going to kind of speak to that kind of relates to all that he's presented here is in the financial services vertical. And a lot of this came up in the planning, right? So if you guys have been in this business long enough, your clients come to you and say, hey, okay, next year we want to do this, and our goals are this, and usually they're a lot higher than they were the previous year. Then they also want to figure out, well, how am I going to get there? And they want good reasons for it so they can go to their bosses, feel confident in what they're saying. And with this client, these big growth goals were kind of daunting, and they were trying to figure out how to get there. And looking at it in what they're currently doing, you just realize that, hey, you need mobile to get there. If you don't have mobile, you're not going to get those incremental units. You go back to where they were from a perspective of how they're spending their media dollars. It was based upon, kind of antiquated measurement, right? We all know the last click model. They spoke to attribution here. But, as digital marketers, we know things don't work in a silo. Usually, if you're spending your money smartly, regardless of what channels in the mix, you feel it in the cash register, you feel the lift. Well, convincing leadership, stuff that isn't really fact-driven and the numbers don't line up on a one-to-one is pretty difficult. So, we had to get to a point of getting them out of that mentality of what they were doing, which wasn't driving incremental, because they're looking at it based upon old analytics that are telling them, okay, this display dollar got this much, this display got this much, and then they're trying to come up with proxies for view base, and it was getting really difficult, and people were scared to make that move to mobile. So with that measurement, and those gaps in measurement, there definitely had to be buy-in, right? So in getting this move over to mobile, you have to figure out the way, how do I close that loop? How do I show that these mobile dollars are leading to this if I can't tie it to the analytics system I have it in place? So this client worked with our analytics team and found, okay, let's at least push enough there to get some statistical confidence in, hey, we're spending this much, and it means this, right? So if you install, you get this many signups, and you get this many purchases or subscriptions or whatever it may be on the back end, regardless of where they are at. Trying to get that proxy to it so you can start doing some math and some planning to get them there. And with that, they were able to take that first leap. Because I think what happens a lot of times is you do a little dip in it, it doesn't work, you revert back to what it is, because basically people are scared to take a chance. And now with time spent being definitely heavily favored towards mobile, and the apps that he had mentioned, Facebook, Instagram, the Google apps, if you really wanted to reach that consumer, be there in their journey, you had to make that work. So they took that step, got they didn't have a good measurement system in place. They started working with Kochava, got that implemented, started to have the conversations with Facebook on different measurement ways they can measure incremental lift, started making that gamble, made some improvements to their app, and started to look at a bigger investment in this. So as they developed those proxies, they got more and more confident. Year-over-year growth of year-to-year index. And if you look at the financial services industry, a lot of guys have a peak right now, right? So this endeavor really started before last January. They started dipping their toe in it, and as they pushed through in their peak and dedicated more money to it, they saw the goodness. Then they couldn't. And then the issue was, well, it's not a one-to-one, but the cash register is going up. So they kept on spending more and more, getting a little more diversified in how they were doing it. And as they started to get the data from a place like Kochava, and they're starting to see the engagement through the post-install actions, it gave them more and more faith that they were doing the right thing. And I would say that's one of the key points, is that if you have the right measurement in place, and what's wonderful about the mobile web versus the mobile app type of thing, and mobile app, you get that wonderful device ID. You have something that you can hang your hat on, that you can leverage for targeting. And in the measurement side, that along with whatever other PII they're able to get, help them tie that loop as far as what it really meant to the bottom line. So as they wanted to scale and really get a read on it, one of the other components in this, and people struggle with, is when you go into mobile, I think Will had mentioned it before, that some people go, okay, we'll just let the whole thing take care of itself, and we'll just do mobile, and then we'll see where it shakes out. But ultimately, it brings down your CPA, and you don't have a signal on what worked in mobile and what didn't. So one of the key parts of the strategy was to ensure that we had the right targeting in place, and make sure we had the right measurement of the targeting. And tools like Kensho kind of made that possible. As you can develop personas and you can do things at scale, and you can test out messaging versus target against did that drive this versus that, as opposed to just looking at it as one chunk. It gave us signal, And ultimately, if you get that signal, then it gives you something to latch onto, and it gives you confidence in growing that a bit more. So, the targeting was definitely a key element, and a big seismic shift was, if you're used to the display world of, hey, I'm going to use my programmatic, and I have predictive, I have these third-party stuff, you have this cookie-based world where you might not feel as confident, and a lot of times that third-party data doesn't work well. Part of their roadmap was leveraging somebody that had good targeting and good scale, which is Facebook, right? So when you have that in place, you have the elements of take that first-party data and build lookalikes off of it, and it gives you a little bit more. The data is definitely richer than you were seeing in the display world. So I think and the insights you get out of it are a little more granular and a lot of times match up better to the research. So, I always tell people that, that if you can't make it work in the Facebook and Instagram world, you're probably going to have struggles in making it work anywhere, because that time spent, that engagement you get there, that roadmap that can give you as a foundation gives you that confidence to go, okay, I got this, now I'm going to move it over, do that same playbook maybe in Twitter. Or what are you going to do when you look at Snapchat? And one reason why they're going to evolve in the app install space, for example, is they're taking in that first-party data, building lookalikes off it, letting you suppress off of it. So, as people have moved out of that display and the customer has seen that, they've seen that, having that good roadmap and that foundation of a Facebook that allows for the targeting, allows for the measurement, and the other guys are kind of falling into place. We're seeing that you've seen that with Twitter, with their customer, their tailored audiences. You see that with Snapchat. Everybody's got a little different name for their audience set, but it lets you really leverage that first-party data along with their data, and usually you get the best results out of that. So, if we look at that, from a targeting perspective, measurement, and just where time spent is, it was a kind of a no-brainer for this client to make the moves, and they've had the big growth to kind of go along with it, and they keep getting incremental dollars and wanting to fund it more and more. So it's definitely been a win for us.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
No problem.
Thanks a lot, Alfred. Good. Well, we know we are preventing you from getting over to lunch, so we'll wrap it up here. Just a quick recap. Again, mobile strategy continues to evolve. I think there's no perfect answers to a number of the key questions here, but we hope you're taking away that being in the key parts of the customer journey and in all of them, not just some of them, better understanding the impact of mobile and improving the conversion rate, and specifically through some of the new mechanisms that are coming out that we enable, that the publishers are enabling, are what's allowing some of the best advertisers to really scale up their mobile advertising.